Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and so much has been talked about with the whole trans agenda and how the left is weaponizing culture in order to target our children and target even adults with all of these radical surgeries, hormone replacement therapy, and all kinds of things that are basically trying to negate immutable characteristics that we know are God-given. So one of the foremost projects on this subject is a 30-page research paper that I would commend to your reading that is called the Transgender Leviathan, which is done by Pedro Gonzalez, who joins me now. He is a senior fellow at the American Principles Project. So Pedro, thanks so much for joining. And just give me an overview, first of all, about this Leviathan and why this is so important to understanding really what is behind this movement.
Yeah. Well, Jenna, thanks for having me. I chose the name because it sounds maybe odd, but as I was digging into the research and trying to kind of get an understanding of the issue, and more importantly, to kind of boil it down to an overview that anybody can read and understand that this is not some trivial issue that doesn't affect you, right? It's not, it's because the framing that you'll hear from, let's call them moderate Republicans, or squishes, whatever, is that basically this is not it's not a pocketbook issue, and therefore it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't directly affect the lives of millions of people, but actually it does. And there's no opting out. And so the name, the Leviathan, came to me because I just kind of thought of the biblical monster, this massive creature that's sort of lurking beneath the surface, and you can never really see how true the actual size of the thing. You can kind of only catch glimpses of the whole. And again, this report's about 10,000 words, and it's still just scratching the surface of it. And so what I try to do is kind of give what I think is the case of a confluence between ideological and basically the confluence between ideology and interest. And so what I mean by that is I don't think there's ever a single answer to explain any of these things. I always think there's obviously more than one. It's kind of reductionist to assume, like a lot of conservatives initially assumed, is that all this stuff is just the product of bad ideas. Well, it's not. It's actually really well funded. And that's why even when you can bring the better argument to bear in the supposedly free market of ideas, you still lose. You know, this whole thing doesn't slow down. Like, the federal government is still funding it with your dollars. It's still being adopted more and more by medical institutions. Well, why is that? And this is where I think that the interest part comes in, is that, yes, there are true believers. There are people who really believe that, you know, like a 9-year-old boy can sort of snap his fingers and become a girl with enough cross-sex hormones and castration and things like that. There are people that really do believe in those things, but there's also a really well-funded machine behind them. And that's really what I try to show in this report, is that these things come together, special interests and ideology, and they create this massive Leviathan that I think is actually, believe it or not, in the United States is actually, I think, the worst. We like to make fun of Europeans because Europeans have weird ideas, but England, Finland, and Norway have all slammed the brakes on this stuff because they're realizing that this comes with irreversible consequences. You know, we're destroying the lives of children and making a generation of Franken kids. And there's actually very little sound evidence, surprise, behind this stuff, right? Even in the Netherlands, where there's some of the key research that is used in the United States to justify these medical interventions for kids, people like in the Netherlands, the researchers themselves who are behind a lot of this stuff are just like baffled. You know, they've gone on the record to say, we think it's really bizarre and inappropriate that our research, which is still in progress, is being used to basically justify really extreme measures in the United States. But there's no sign of slowing down, which is, again, why I think you have to put these two things together, ideas and money.
Yeah, and kind of skipping ahead to a end section of your piece, which is the politics of transgenderism.
Yeah.
Let's kind of start there, because you're right that a lot of the pushback to conservatives' concerns over this is, well, you know, if it's not your kid that is transitioning or it's not your body, then how does this even affect you? But you're absolutely right that this has a huge effect on society, and it especially has a big effect when not only are we funding this through tax dollars potentially, but also when our society is then at times forcibly compelling us or even our private workplaces to enter into compelled speech and lies, like affirming transgender preferred pronouns, which as a Christian, I'm not going to do that. And as even just a person of common sense. So it's a faith-based objection, but it's also a reality-based objection. So where did this start in terms of the politics of it and the ideology of it before we get into exactly, you know, how it's funded and some of the other things?
Yeah. So I think you really have to look at this in snapshots. And so maybe one good snapshot, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, is John Money. And so I start with the story of John Money and the John Joan experiment. The John Joan experiment at the beginning of my report, because I argue that basically Bruce Peter Reamer, who died under the name David Reamer, was a kind of transgender kid, patient zero. And there are a lot of things about his life and tragedy that really kind of prefigured what's happening today. And so basically, John Money was a pioneer in certain fields like sexology and psychology. He was mostly known for his research into intersexual conditions. These are people that are born, it's people that we would refer to as hermaphrodites, although I don't think that term's actually used that much anymore. But at the time, you know, John Money wrote his dissertation on hermaphrodites and things like that. But Money was really concerned with proving a general theory about humans, and that's that the primary differentiators for us in terms of our sexuality and our gender are more a matter of nurture than nature. And so Money was not mainly concerned with these kind of unique cases of people that are born with both sexual organs. He wanted to prove that basically with the proper application of medical science, you can actually turn a boy into a girl. And so in the 60s, there was a little boy who was born Bruce Peter Reamer, and his penis was severely damaged during a botched circumcision. And the family, this doesn't make much sense to us today, but the family was really desperate, and they had heard about the stuff that John Money was doing at Johns Hopkins University, where his clinic was based. And basically, the family went to him and said, you know, we've heard about your stuff, because Money was really good at promoting it in the media. He's very good at manipulating the media to spread his ideas. And so that's where the family heard about him and what he was doing. And they asked him, you know, if you turn our boy into a girl, one, can you do that? And two, will he have a normal life? And Money, of course, jumped on the opportunity and actually started to kind of badger the parents, because although they came to him, they were reluctant to go through with it, because this is, you know, at the time, this has never been done before. A sex change operation had never been done on a child that had been born with normal sexual organs, right? So this is really radical. And so the family is like, okay, this is interesting, but we need time to think about it. And just like today, money is badgering them, kind of suggesting that on the one hand, I'm not going to help you if you take much longer. And on the other hand, your kid needs this, right? This is the treatment that your kid needs. And so what happens? The family ultimately goes along with it. As part of the experiment, Bruce Peter Reamer takes the name Brenda and is raised until the age of 15 as a girl. His parents are strictly instructed to never tell him that he was born a boy. As part of the experiment, the brother, a twin brother named Brian Reamer, is included. And I mean, I'm winding this down, but it's really bad. And again, you can kind of see shades of today. As part of affirming what John Money called the gender schema, he would have the two twin brothers simulate sexual acts on each other under his supervision. And in some cases, according to Brian Reamer, John Money would photograph this stuff. He would photograph the two twin brothers, ages 6, simulating sexual acts, like in sexual positions, because again, Money thought this was necessary for Brenda to become Brenda. But Brenda was always miserable. Brenda never actually felt like a Brenda. And at the age of 15, his parents told him, you were born a boy and you're part of this insane experiment. And what's important as well is that Money's research was always funded by the federal government. I'm not exactly sure about the John Jones case, but his research in the field of sexology and related stuff was funded by the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And even after this experiment and the truth of it came to light, he still continued receiving money from the NIH to conduct research into this field. So back to Brenda. So at 15, Brenda takes the name David because he identifies with a biblical figure. Right? He feels like he's been up against a Goliath his whole life. And he tries to have a normal life. He adopts kids. He gets married. But ultimately in 2004, after struggling with trauma for his whole life, he kills himself. He shoots himself in the head with a shotgun. And this is 2 years after his brother, Brian Reamer, overdoses on antidepressants. Now, John Money went to the grave insisting that, when the truth came out about how this whole thing was a disaster, and he knew it, although he marketed it as a total success, he went to the grave insisting that this was a conservative plot against him to make him look bad and to undermine his research, which it was promulgated by major medical journals, the New York Times, it was spread throughout the United States as a resounding success. This experiment was proof that with the proper application of science, we can change human nature as such. And again, his work was funded until the very end by the NIH. And so in a nutshell, I mean, I use it as a kind of this was in the 60s. And the truth of the case and how everything was, actually a disaster came out in the 90s, but it didn't stop anything from happening. People continue to get money into this research. And again, that's your money. You can't opt out of facilitating the research of people like John Money today.
Which is this is so horrific and so disgusting. And I hope that everyone listening to this is as disgusted as you and I are around someone like a John Money who would try to manipulate a child's life. I mean, people who want to be part of medical experiments, I mean, there are so many laws that require informed consent for people to know that they are participating in what is experimental medication. And, maybe they're doing that because they have some kind of condition that they want to resolve. But to perpetuate this on a child is just so horrific and so disgusting. And it also seems that this type of redefinition of science and of biology and gender as being feelings and emotions driven, that is totally arbitrary, depending on how one perceives themselves, what other outside influences, that whole nature versus nurture debate versus biology and versus fact. Those are things that are part and parcel to the sexual revolution. And so, this as the rise of the over-sexualization of society, and with all of the legal cases that were also going on in the 60s to try to get contraceptives more in the mainstream. A lot of these cases at the Supreme Court level that were trying to ultimately allow for the sexual revolution to be perpetuated. This just goes hand in hand with that. And so in talking, though, about the NIH and the funding, I think Dr. Fauci wasn't quite there yet, but probably his predecessor. And I can't believe how disgusting these people are. I have no other word for it. But it makes sense to me why Big Pharma, if they have no moral ethic at all, would want to fund this type of research because they're creating clients. It's a whole consumer-driven mentality. But why would the federal government and the NIH even care about something like this when this is, to me, it seems like this is more consumer-driven than any sort of legitimate government purpose?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is, I'm not sure. But one thing I do know is that a society filled with people who are completely disconnected from their very bodies, from their nature, is a society of people that's really easy to control. It's just a reality. And I write about in my report about the concept of compensatory consumption. And so compensatory consumption is basically how you react to perceived threats to your identity through consumerism. And so what we can see is that people who identify as trans are much more likely than people who are like you and I, cisgender, as they say. I don't actually use that term, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
People like us.
We just use the term regular humans and
that's right.
Exactly.
People like us are much less likely than trans people to buy products that, like, if something is marketed as like, I don't know, like heterosexual, straight cigars or something like that, like people like us are not really going to be moved to like, oh man, that product really speaks to me. But people who are trans are actually much more likely to go out and buy something if it's marketed in that way, or if a company explicitly states, we stand with trans people against violence, which is, as simple as misgendering them or something like that. This is just true. Trans people are very easily driven to go and buy things, to react to that stimulus. And so, that's just one way of looking at this, is that you have a population that's really easy to kind of control. Of course, yes. I'm sorry, but if you can be convinced that men can become women, you can probably be convinced of a lot of things, right? And if you're not convinced by that, well, that's where the state comes in. And I write about this as well. I give the example of a physician named Johanna Olsen Kennedy. And at a conference, she was asked by an attendee, this is I think in 2017, she was asked by an attendee, what do you do if you have parents who have been told they have a trans kid and, the recommendation is to begin the process of transitioning them? And Dr. Olsen Kennedy said, there have been a number of cases where I have recalcitrant, that's the term she used, parents who have been given every opportunity to do the right thing and to go along with the process, and they don't. And she says, but I have no problems getting the courts involved. She said, that's not my first line. That's my second or third line of action, but I have no problem getting the courts involved. And she says that on 5 or 6 occasions, she successfully brought the courts to bear on a family where they argue that the kid is trans and then they need medical intervention. And so the other thing about Dr. Olsen Kennedy is that she conducted research arguing that girls as young as 13 should be eligible for mastectomies as part of this process. And that research, I found, was funded by the NIH. So again, you don't get to opt out. These people, day in, day out, that's what they're doing. With your money, they're talking to social workers. They're working with courts. So by the time that you actually get to the court and you're standing in front of a judge arguing that this is my child and I'm not abusing them by protecting them, well, that judge has already been brought up to speed on what transgenderism really is and how all this stuff is life-saving by social workers and by physicians who are all either being paid to say this stuff or really believe in it, or, if their faith in their beliefs falters, well, they're being paid by it. So, might as well. But really, I think that's how you have to understand it, is if you ever find yourself in a court like that in front of a judge, that judge has already been spoken to by experts and physicians who have told them that you're actually endangering your child by not doing this.
Yeah, which is just so hideous. And, from my own experience working, as an advocate, both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and I clerked for a judge in domestic relations. And so had a lot of child custody disputes and, other, in terms of divorces and, things like that as well. And really, judges do often go along with what the experts say, particularly if there aren't competing experts. And even if,
Yeah.
like in the situation of James Younger in Texas,
Yeah.
and that child who his mom wants to make him a girl, and his dad is fighting so hard, and I believe just lost his latest appeal in that case. And I think you're right that all of the experts are telling these judges, oh, this is in the best interest of the child.
Yeah.
And so the judge has extreme pressure to go along with that,
Yeah.
because they're going to say, well, who are you, judge, to say that, I'm the social worker in this case, I'm the probation officer in this case, I'm the, the therapist in this case, or I'm the psychologist in this case. And so I know what's best in terms of the interests of the child. And often, especially when it comes with children, when you have guardian ad litem and, some of those that are state appointed counselors or even attorneys on behalf of the supposed interests of the children, that really puts a wedge and drives a wedge between what should be the parent's right to direct the best interests of the child rather than the state superseding their own judgment. So you are absolutely right in terms of, once you get to court, it's almost too late at that point.
Yeah.
And, as we're looking at how the state has manipulated this so far, I'm also thinking of, a lot of the high school students and that kind of age and college students who want to be part of a subculture. They don't fit in. I mean, everybody remembers high school and how in some ways traumatic it was. I was homeschooled, so thankfully, I got to not deal with a lot of that type of pressure, which was great, and just focus on the truth. But ultimately, a lot of these kids that we're seeing who are coming out as bi or queer or trans or whatever, if you look at the social mores that are being absolutely destroyed in this country, we have this whole tenor that children are believing that if I come out as queer or trans, I'm protected, I get a whole new class of rights and privileges attached. And if I say that I'm for example, white, straight male, then you are literally at the lowest of the low. You don't even have privileges or rights anymore. In fact, you're hated. So there's a lot of social pressure as well for kids to just buy into this when probably they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah. There's a school in California. I stumbled across, I think it was a video on Instagram of this teacher. I don't remember the name of the school, but I as soon as I saw the video, I contacted the school and I asked them, do parents know you're doing this? And so in this video, a teacher is talking about how he's going to partner with an organization called the Transition Closet. I wrote an article about this for Intellectual Takeout. And so this is how he describes it on this video to presumably his students. And he says that basically when your parents drop you off, you come to school in your normal clothes. And then when they're gone, with the help of the Transition Closet, we give you clothes to help you affirm your real gender. And he likens it to Clark Kent transforming into Superman. So he says it's just like how, Clark Kent goes into a phone booth and he comes out as Superman. And like, that's what your actual gender identity, it's like being Superman. So in other words, he's glamorizing it. And so I called the school and I asked them, like, do parents know you're doing this? And they were not happy about it. So I published the article, and I did some more digging on the Transition Closet, which, by the way, was actually being hosted by a church. I thought it was odd because I went to go see how do you make a donation, how do you support the program, and I saw that the address was to a church, and so I called, and it's a church in the South, and I right in the South, so there's no running from it. You can't run from it in Texas, you can't run from it in the Deep South, and so I called and I asked, so the Transition Closet, can you tell me more about it? Because I really want to support what you guys are doing. And they told me, like, yeah, we basically, at our church, we have a space where we allow them to store our clothes, and then they send it out across the country. And they're opening like other chapters and stuff like that. And after I published the story, I called the school again and I asked them, do you want to comment now? And they were even less happy to talk to me then. But that's another key aspect of this is they're doing this behind your back. You might not care about it. You might think it's like, well, it's not like the price of gas or something. Doesn't matter. You drop your kids off at school, teachers are still going to do this, whether you care about it or not.
Yeah,
And
it's still going to affect you. And also for those of us who maybe are homeschooling our kids or who are trying to keep them away from these types of influences, these are still going to be your kids' friends,
yes,
even kids that they may go to church with
yes,
and people who live in society. I mean, I'm thinking of, my little nephews when they grow up and they start wanting to date, having all kinds of issues and, with questioning potentially the actual biological gender of people that they meet.
yep,
And and you mentioned early on in the interview about how we're now raising this generation of Frankensteins, and it's so disturbing because it's so true that
yeah,
for people who have come out of this transgender ideology, they know that their bodies are damaged, they know that this was a lie, and we're seeing more and more evidence of that. And yet the people who are responsible, they are hiding. They're not doing this out in the open. They're not saying, oh, this is truly what we believe is best. They're doing it behind closed doors, or they're doing it in a scenario like a courtroom where they have authority and parents feel like they are totally helpless. So in just the last 2 minutes that I have with you, Pedro, and I would ask everyone, please go and read the Transgender Leviathan. You can find it at the AmericanPrinciplesProject.org. You do end with hope and
yep,
with a section called The Way Forward.
yeah.
So what is the way forward out of this beyond, of course, coming back to God? And everyone has to take this incredibly seriously.
Yeah, that's right. We have to use the tools that are immediately available to us, and those are political tools. It takes time to change culture, right? But we can do things politically. And I mean, I was really, if you follow me on social media, you know that I was really fired up about the 20 Republicans who stood up to Kevin McCarthy and basically used leverage to secure, meaningful concessions, I think. And so it's an example of how politics can actually change things and change the game. And so basically what I argue in conclusion is that that's exactly what we need to do. Wherever possible, however possible, we need to make it essentially illegal to conduct any kind of medical interventions related to transgenderism on kids. I mean, sex reassignment in general should be considered a kind of quackery, but specifically and above all, obviously, when it comes to kids, like absolutely illegal. It should be no less illegal than lobotomizing somebody, even if they consent to it. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you run a clinic or if you're a physician that administers anything, whether it's puberty suppression and cross-sex hormones or surgical interventions, whatever, you lose your license and you go to jail. Very simple. If you're a clinic and you get caught doing this, and obviously this is obviously where it gets kind of complicated, is that there are clinics that do other things, but on top of that, they have like divisions or units that specifically focus on trans kids. Well, if you don't want to lose your license to practice in general, then you have to close down that unit that provides, medical intervention for trans kids or whatever. Because first of all, that's not even
this seems just so obvious as well.
right.
I mean, we have standards and policies in the United States and laws as well that condemn other countries that have these heinous practices like female genital mutilation, right? FGM. Right. And yet that's exactly the same thing that these doctors under the auspices of trans or queer theory are doing to our kids every day. And I don't see legally how that's a distinction without a difference, because it's exactly the same thing.
Yep, it is. It's completely the same. So that's a huge part of it. I mean, some of this would require, some of this you can do on the state level. You don't have to wait for, the White House to save you. But having control of the White House would allow us to do other things that are important. Like I argue that we should basically, the next right-wing president should make it so that there is no federal funding that goes to any of this stuff. Like what the NIH stops giving grants to any institution or individual that is doing research that is however related to this. Just completely cut off the spigot. And then the part that would require legal minds, which mine is not, I kind of just look at the big picture, is basically creating an environment where you can be held liable for marketing products or services related to this that results in someone seeing something that you've produced to that effect, and they go and they get like, puberty suppression or cross-sex hormones or whatever. And afterwards they realize I permanently ruined my body. Then you get sued. Basically, it needs to be so high risk to administer this stuff that it just becomes impossible to do it.
Those are all really great solutions. And go
Thank you.
ahead.
No, that's it. That's really it. And again, some of this stuff can be done on the state level now. If there's will, if there's political will, and it's doable now. Some of it does require control of the White House, but there's really no reason that we have to wait, for the next Republican president. Look at Florida. I think Florida is doing a fantastic job on this stuff. There's no reason that other states cannot follow suit. I think the issue is just fear.
Right. Well, and the issue is going against this cultural mindset that just, shockingly, the large swath of not just the Democrats and liberals, but even some churches and pastors and so-called Christians are buying into this type of LGBTQ theory. And they're saying, well, you're a hateful bigot if you don't support this. We have to stand up in courage and say, no, this is wrong. And we have to combat this at every way, shape, or form possible with all the tools at our disposal. And so I really commend you, Pedro Gonzalez, for standing up and being willing to speak the truth in very plain terms. I know that you get a lot of hate for it, but there are also so many people, and I'm sure children ultimately will grow up and be very thankful for you, for whether it's their parents who are convinced or a doctor through your work that will ultimately be saved from a life of having their body botched. And so you're doing really excellent work on this. It's incredibly important.
Thank you.
So thank you for speaking out on this. And where can people find you, follow you? Go again to the website for the American Principles Project to download the free report. It's free. Shockingly, I think you want everyone to be able to read this for the Trans Leviathan.
Yeah. So you can follow me at contra.substack.com. I publish original writing and analysis there. I've done some writing about this report, kind of taking out sections and expanding upon it there. I've also got links to all my social media there, and I publish interviews and work that I do elsewhere at contra.substack.com.
Well, thank you, Pedro Gonzalez. Again, really appreciate your work, and I look forward to talking with you soon. And I'll be sharing this everywhere on my social media as well. It's an incredibly valuable resource. So thank you for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook. You need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
Have you ever picked up a towel set because it felt so soft in the store, but then when you leave and you go to use it, it's not really that absorbent? It's basically a towel that is leaving you out to dry. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels that actually work. I know, it's totally mind-blowing. Towels that actually dry you. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors. I have the sage green and the white. I love them. And right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $39.98 with promo code Jenna. That's JENNA. So go to mypillow.com right now and click on the radio listeners special. MyPillow products come with a 10-year warranty and have a 60-day money-back guarantee. So to receive this amazing offer on the 6-piece towel set of MyPillow towels, just go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and enter promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, or call 1-800-564-8475. That's mypillow.com, promo code Jenna.